Hello, my name is Molotov Kirill. I will present you my research methods for constructing the memory of the USSR, YouTube critique of Yury Dud's Kolyma documentary. In Russia, the memory of Stalinism is an ambiguous topic. Surveys show that part of the society views Stalin in a positive light. These views are fueled by public historians, professional matter, who create narratives in favor of the Soviet leader. Given that the facts on Stalin's terror have been unveiled for several decades now, creating such a narrative means a complicated memory work. In this paper, I use the example of such historians' responses to the YouTube movie Kolyma, Birthplace of Our Fear, to find out how these narratives are used to construct an online memory of Stalinism. I suggest that bloggers who criticize Kolyma use the image of Great Patriotic War and various techniques of representation to normalize and justify mass repressions in 1930s. The YouTube documentary, Kolyma, Birthplace of Our Fear, dedicated to Stalinist repression, was created by Yury Dud, a popular YouTube interviewer, and came out in April of 2019. On the slide, you can see some arguments of the film, which are important for further video reviews. The reason for creating this film was the publication of survey, which showed that almost half of the people aged 18 to 24 had never heard of Stalinist repression. In the course of the film, the issues of Stalin's personal responsibility for repressions, everyday life of prisoners in the Kolyma camps, as well as contemporary problems of the Kolyma population are discussed. I'm studying 4 video reviews of Kolyma. Dud about Kolyma, the analysis of Goblin and Zhukov. You can look at views and ratio of likes and dislikes. The whole Dud in 30 minutes, Constant Summon the Wickedness of the Day, Yury Dud and Kolyma, Lies, Emotions, Dilettantism, and Stalin, Dud and Kolyma. I selected these videos according to the following principles. First of all, a number of reviews and containing targeted criticism and finding the weakness of Kolyma. Also, these videos had to be made specially for YouTube. Another criterion of the selection of critical reviews is the frequency of mentioning the authors and referring to their arguments in the post of ordinary users of various social networks. One second. The bloggers describe themselves as communists, with the exception of Dmitry Puchkov, but he believes that communism is the only correct way for any state to develop. All of them sometimes appear in each other's videos and form a communist sector on YouTube. All of them are supporters of the Marxist approach to history, historical materialism. Andrei Rudov, for example, says that his task is to interpret events through Marxism to move people to the left ideology, those who understand processes correctly. I should also say that all of them have a positive attitude towards the USSR. For instance, Dmitry Puchkov equates criticism of the Soviet system and the state with Russophobia. The fact that these public historians operate online isn't a coincidence. The internet, in particular social media, provides access to alternative historical narratives, as each user can create content on his own. In this way, completely different ideological groups have access to broadcasting their versions of history. For example, communists, as in my research. John Gardner Hansen, who represents a critical approach to media memory, writes that media and popular culture primarily broadcast the historical narratives of the dominant minority, those who own or finance media platforms. She also notes the ideological component of such narratives. They use history, first of all, to form certain ideas about current situation. So social media give voices to other groups. I suggest using Gada Hansen's optics to consider these public historians as a certain ideological group, which offers us its versions of the past. They do so to speak about current situation. The internet is not only just a platform, but also a media that dictates its own rules. As Nager, Mayers, and Zandberg wrote, we need to consider not only the narratives of mnemonic actors, but also the representation of these narratives, taking into account the specific of the platform for translating these narratives. Thus, while analyzing the video, I also paid attention to the visual component and their intonations to understand, for example, sarcasm. The main method I used in my research was content analysis. This study compares narratives and their representation in bloggers' videos. To do so, I coded transcript videos on the Atlas TI platform. You can see the codes using for this report on the slide. This method allowed me to highlight common and different patterns in bloggers' videos. I will discuss only a few topics: reason of repression, symbol of Great Patriotic War, a life of prisoners in camps, comparison of the USSR and Russia Federation. The blogger narratives around these topics show us normalizing and justifying Stalinist repressions. For each of these topics, I will give general narratives and then their representation. Bloggers opposite to Dud, who sees the need for free labor as the main reason for mass repression, see the reasons for repression in the preparation for World War, for New World War. Yury Yakovlev notes the approaching war influenced the minds of the Soviet leadership. He believes that Stalin had remembered the experience of First World War, when an attack on the government was actually deployed from the rear. Klim Zhukov describes kulaks as a social group armed with firearms and locally organized, which was a danger to the country's home front during the war. Also worth mentioning are the various terrorist operations that were performed by spy organizations working inside the country. Konstantin says, not to justify everything or to whitewash or swipe it under the carpet, the world was heading to a new war, a world war. This explains the special mass scale and brutality of repressions. In other words, the communist Samata historians see the repressions as the act of the defense or on the home front, like a battle in the Second World War. Bloggers believe that the repression was justified. One second. Igor Yakovlev says everything that happened in the 1930s can be seen as preparation for war, which was, of course, salvation of the country and its people only this way. And since the main goal was achieved, it seems to me that in the mistakes made in this 1930s were thus redeemed. By mistakes, Igor Yakovlev means innocent victims of repression. In his discussion with Klim Zhukov, Dmitry Puchkov says the following: Comrade Stalin, on the other hand, there is his antipode, Adolf Hitler, and you promptly decide whether you are for us or for Hitler. That's where people confidently define yes. In addition, he claimed that if the repression is considered a crime, then we can say that victory in the Great Patriotic War was achieved by a criminal government and in criminal way. he says the direct consequence of this thought is a change in the territorial integrity of the Russian Federation. Bloggers pose a moral dilemma, focusing us to choose between Hitler and Stalin. And by choosing Stalin in this situation, we are forced to forgive the repression of Stalinist regime. Such a technique allowed them and us as spectators to justify any cruelty that was committed in the 1930s, because everything was done for the sake of victory in the Great Patriotic War. The third topic the bloggers cover is the prison labor. Each of the authors notes that prisoners' labor was paid for. They admit that the wages were low, however, it wasn't free or slave. Referring to Brodkin and Ert's work, structure and stimulation of forced labor in the Gulag, they note that the contribution of prisoners to GDP was only 4%, so their effectiveness was low, and therefore forced labor couldn't be the main reason for repressions. The plight of prisoners and the high mortality rate in the camps, 2 million according to Kolyma, are attributed by some bloggers to the difficult situation in the country because of Great Patriotic War. PoSoCoMeS says, it was difficult for people in Magadan. Was it difficult? It was. Was it cold? It was. Was it scary? It was. But not only for them, and not only in the Magadan region. Wasn't it difficult in Stalingrad? At the same time, by the way, wasn't it difficult in Leningrad at the same time? Wasn't it difficult in Bern and Sevastopol at the same time? Prisoners are thus equated to the Soviet people in general. Their difficulties are written off as common for the period. The camp life is normalized in the bloggers' narratives. Andrei Rudoy calls the prisoners camp inhabitants instead of inmates, talking about a prisoner working as an accountant in Dalstroy. Klim Zhukov says, it wasn't that bad to work as an accountant there. Sorry, in all honesty. Discussing repression, Dmitry Puchkov and Klim Zhukov ironically used stereotypical anti-Stalinist phrases such as bloody Soviets. Obviously, the building was built on bones. They were fucked and then shot, of course. So they emphasize the rightness of their side. The violence and the reasons for the repression were not groundless. The critics spent quite a lot of time comparing modern Russia with the USSR. First of all, they disagree with Dud's concept of fear. Dud says that fear was originated in Stalin's repression. Igor Yakovlev suggested that people are more likely to feel fear of the 1990s, the fear of USSR collapse. Andrei Rudoy, Dmitry Puchkov, and PoSoCoMeS suggested that modern people are more afraid of capitalist reality than Stalinist repression. Klim Zhukov said, I have exactly one fear, that I won't pay the mortgage in time. The Soviet Union is described as a superior regime. Bloggers rely on personal experience. Dmitry Puchkov said that in the 90s he could always criticize his boss at the factory without any fear. Bloggers also criticize the collapse of educational system, explain that about 50% of young people are unaware of the repression and privatization policy. PoSoCoMeS actively used the video meme, it wasn't like this under Stalin, showing how various enterprises had prospered in the USSR and then declined under the Russian Federation.
При Сталине такого не было.
PoSoCoMeS argues that all the oligarchs who ruined the country under Stalin would have been sent to the camps. And Igor Yakovlev notes that now, with the growing social inequality, there is a demand for justice. The stronger this inequality is, the more popular will be Stalin and Lenin and the USSR in general. Thus, they state that it's necessary to return the Stalinist era, as evidenced directly by Konstantin Somin. Certain communists, thanks to social media, are shaping their version of the past, Stalin's repressions. The 4 blocks above showed us that the common basis for these narratives was a symbol of a great patriotic war, through which bloc justifies the repression. They said that repression is one of the stage of preparation for war, and otherwise Hitler would have won. Stalin is responsible for the repression, but it was justified a measure to defeat Hitler. In addition, they reinforced their narratives by criticizing Russian domestic politics. The more there is social inequality, the more popular the figure of Stalin will be. The Soviet Union was a strong state, and the repression helped this state to survive and stay strong. Thank you for watching this video, and I'm waiting for your questions.